Welcome back. You're listening to Fast Car to NASCAR with Mike Wallace. My name is Jeff Kent. Today's guest on the line, David Ragan, and we got up to the Cup Series, and we're talking about driving for Roush Racing. Once again, high atop the pit box inside the Crosley Speed Sports Studios. Here's Mike Wallace.
Well, the great thing about this, we were just kind of going back with David in a previous segment, is that he went straight from running a few truck races, a few Xfinity races, to replacing the legendary Hall of Famer Mark Martin in a Cup car.
That's huge.
That's incredible. So, David, if you'll tell us, tell the story of when you got that ride and how it went from that point forward.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, getting the actually, I don't think it was a phone call. I think Jeff Smith just said, hey, come to my office. And he said, hey, we decided that you're going to replace Mark Martin next year. At the time Mark was going to retire, he ended up going on to race for several more years. But I remember thinking like, man, that's a lot. And I also ran the Xfinity Series full time those first 2 years. So I ran, every race in both series and traveled back and forth. And it was tough. I mean, I remember like being out in Sonoma and not being able to run the whole, practice on Saturday because we had to fly to Milwaukee to go run the Xfinity race. And as a driver, man, it was awesome getting to do all this racing. But looking back at it, I was probably stretched too thin. I was the young man over at Roush Racing, so I was doing every appearance that the other drivers didn't want to do, flying places in the middle of the week, doing all kinds of autograph sessions and appearances and production days. And so, but I didn't know any different. That's all I had. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids, but it would have been probably better for me on racetrack to just run one series or just put a little more time in preparing for some of these tracks. I mean, it was a lot, but it was an opportunity that I had in front of me, and it was like a sink or swim moment. But I had a lot of fun and made a lot of good memories. Obviously, racing with Greg Biffle and Matt Kenseth, and Jamie McMurray was my teammate for a while. Carl Edwards. Those were all outstanding guys I learned a lot from. I wish I would have asked more questions, but had a very good run at Roush Racing.
Talking about asking more questions, and I've always wondered this because I've really never drove with a team that I've had a teammate. When you were competing with those 3 or 4 other guys on your team, were you in total competition with them, or were you just a teammate trying to make the organization better?
Well, if you know Jack Roush, he encourages competition within the company. And I think that's a great thing if you can keep it healthy. And for the most part, it was pretty healthy. But at times you would have, crew chiefs, engineers, doing some things that they wouldn't tell the other team just because they wanted to be the best, finisher amongst the organization. There was some pride to that. And that was something that the first thing you looked at on a leaderboard when you came in from qualifying or practice was not where you're at on the sheet, but where you're at compared to all of your teammates. And Jack, he created a little bit of that culture, which I think in general was really good because it creates some healthy competition. But there were some times where, I could feel like, other drivers would get a newer car maybe before I would, or I would get something before they would, or if we found a little trick, we would try to hold it, close to ourselves and not tell our teammates because we were definitely competing against them. So that's, that is one of the small negative things that comes with being on a large team. But mostly anything that I had, if I went to one of the other crew chiefs or certainly the drivers, that they would tell me. But oftentimes, I felt like I might have been bothering them, or I was so busy doing other stuff, I didn't make the time to go and sit down with Matt or sit down with Greg and Carl and ask those questions. And I felt like they, they're all Hall of Fame guys. I think they're some of the best drivers that we've had in the last 25 years of racing. And I think that's another thing that made Roush Racing so successful during that time. But no, it was a great experience. Jack and I are still good friends today. Jimmy Finning was my crew chief my first couple of years there, and still see him on a regular basis. And again, a lot of good memories and a lot of good people that I got to work with that were really smart.
You mentioned Jimmy Finning for a second. I heard something the other day. I mean, is Jimmy still a kind of an integral part over at Roush Racing? Or Roush
He is.
Yeah.
He is an integral part. And your old buddy, Matt Pusha, he was actually my very first crew chief at Roush Racing. Matt was hired on to just hang bodies and do aero work on the truck series. I know he did all of the work on some of your trucks that you won races with.
We won the inaugural race at Daytona. That was a Matt Pusha body on that truck.
That's right.
Yep.
And so Matt was my first crew chief. I ran the Martinsville truck race in 2006. That was my first race for Roush, and Matt was my crew chief. So he's been there that whole time. So Matt and Jimmy Finning are kind of running the day-to-day operations over at Roush. And yeah, Jimmy's still very well respected, and Matt, he knows all the ins and outs of building cars, working on cars, crew chief, and so yeah, that those guys do. That they're doing a good job trying to get that program turned around.
Boy, Jeff, I'm glad I was able to be an asset to Matt's career.
Right? Yeah.
Taught
him everything he knows.
Yeah. So I ask these questions. They sound a little redundant, but our fans love hearing and wanting to know more and more in the in-depth part. If I remember right, Roush Racing, when David Ragan was there, was more had advanced more into the technical side, engineers and all that. Do I have my thoughts right, or am I off on that? Weren't they one of the first Cup teams to actually use what you call data and engineering advice?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and I think Jack has publicly said that while that greatly benefited them while they were moving in the right direction, they had some bad information and they kind of went down a hole around the time that I was leaving in 2011, 12, 13 with this next with the COT, the Car of Tomorrow that was introduced. That's kind of the beginning of what derailed Roush and kind of hurt them. That they really doubled down on some of the information as far as how they view their race cars, how they build the race cars, maybe how quick they react to rule changes and stuff. And I think that hurt Roush Racing. I don't remember specifically some of those decisions, but when you look at where Roush started struggling on track performance in the 2012 to maybe 2014 or 15, that they did. And I remember Jack publicly saying, man, we just followed some bad engineering directions, and we've got to reverse the ship, so to speak.
Gotcha. So you win right, Jeff? Coke 400 is David's first
Coke
win?
Zero 400.
Coke
Zero
Zero 400.
2011.
2011. Tell us about that moment, that final lap. You took the white, and you just need to lead one more lap, and you're going to win. That would have been your first Cup race, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah, I had won a couple of Xfinity races driving for Jack, and those were big moments, but they weren't Cup wins, and it's all about winning Cup races. I think winning those Xfinity races probably saved my job in 2009 and 2010 because we just weren't running well on track. But really, 2011 was a great season for us. I almost won the Daytona 500. We, got black flagged on that green-white checkered for changing lanes. And then we went on to have, I think we ran third at Richmond. We ran second in the Coke 600. We sat on the pole at Texas and ran good. So we had run well up into that summer race, but I just hadn't won a race. Sat on the pole at Indianapolis and led a lot of the race there, and finally got that win. It was I don't even really remember celebrating. It was just more of a relief. Like, man, it finally got that win. It finally came through. I'm glad that's off my shoulders. And I'm not much of a I don't get really mad and I don't get really happy. I stay pretty even kilter most of the time. So. That win was just a big relief. That it was cool. My wife was there. We weren't married at the time, but my girlfriend at the time, my mom and dad, my older brother Adam, I think even a couple of aunts and uncles were there. So it was a cool moment to have some of those fans and friends and family all in victory lane.
I was talking to a couple guys this morning on my way up here to do the show, and they said, "Who's your guest?" And I said, "David Ragan." They said, "Well, David Ragan's got the coolest brother in the world, Adam." Biggest cheerleader for David. Tell us a little bit about Adam, because anywhere, I remember him walking up to me years ago, and he goes, "David's going to beat you. You know that, don't you?"
Yeah, that's
and
right.
we shake hands and we go on. He's as cool as can be. So.
Yeah, I've got an older brother that has Down syndrome, and he is a big race fan, and he certainly was my biggest cheerleader. And like you said, Mike, whoever I was racing, it didn't matter. I was going to beat him. I was going to wreck him. I was that guy, and it didn't matter if it was Jimmy Johnson or Dale Earnhardt Jr. or Danica Patrick. He would walk up and say the same thing. So it was a lot of fun to have Adam around the racetrack. And, the community of NASCAR competitors treated Adam like family, where, he could walk up and down pit road and everybody would talk to him and speak to him. And he really enjoyed those years and still comes to the racetrack today and, recognizes a lot of people. So, yeah, Adam's definitely my biggest fan over the years.
Yeah, great young man, great person. So you have you win the Coke 400. And I'm leading to a story because I need to find what sponsor was on that car when you.
UPS.
All right. So our extraordinary technician Rich told me when he come in here, says David Ragan has a UPS truck. Is that true or not?
Well, it is. I have, but I sold it back to UPS just last year. It's one of those things you can have too much stuff, and my rule of thumb is if I don't drive it, if I don't wear it, if I don't use it in at least a calendar year, it's time to get rid of it. So I was trying to organize and clean up a little bit, and I sold it back to UPS.
You should have tricked it out, turned it into a nice limo or something like that,
so
right? Put a high performance motor in that thing so you could actually say, "Hey, that thing really hauls the mail." Get it?
I should have had that advice a year ago, and I might would have kept it.
So what is the deal about UPS? Since you said you sold it back to them, I don't see any UPS trucks anywhere. Do they not let the average person buy one or get one or whatever?
That's right. Yeah. So they usually crush all of their vehicles when they get used or they're at their time, because they're so sensitive about their brand identity that they don't want Mike's Insulation Company to buy a UPS truck and park it and use it, because people associate that brown UPS delivery truck as someone who they can trust. I mean, they come into offices, into your homes. They know garage codes. So that's why UPS is so sensitive to their brand and that UPS logo. But I had a 1938 UPS package car that somehow did not get crushed. And actually a friend of my uncle's had contacted him about it. He was a car dealer, and he had it since the 1950s. And I guess his family, someone had died, and they were trying to get rid of it. And they're like, "Hey, your nephew drives for UPS. Would he want this?" Well, we looked into it. I talked to the folk. There's a guy who runs the archives for UPS that collects all this old memorabilia, and he was able to verify that it was a UPS package car that was used in Chicago in the 1940s. And whenever it was decommissioned, somehow it got lost and it didn't get crushed. So I bought it from the individual, and 10 or 12 years ago, and we had some fun with it. We drove it around town a little bit, and put it on display at the auto fair here at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and enjoyed it. But it was a single seater, both open doors. It had the small flat head forward. It was all original, and it had a top speed of about 35 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that practical of a vehicle to drive around town, and it took up some space. And so I talked to the UPS folks just a year ago. Said, "Hey, I'm cleaning up. I've got some old cars that I want to get rid of, and would you guys want this?" And they of course said, "Yep, we want it back," and it's sitting in a showroom down in Atlanta at their corporate office.
That's cool. They did some very clever ad campaigns back in the day.
Oh, they did. They were great.
Right? Not very aerodynamic, that truck, but
That's right.
Some very clever ad campaigns.
Yeah. So Rich, that's the whole story about the UPS start. There we go. We got that.
Our day is made.
So, Jeff, why don't we come back and finish up the final segment and talk a little bit more about maybe some hot rods with David.
We're talking to David Ragan. You're listening to Fast Car to NASCAR with Mike Wallace on the Speed Sport Podcast Network, presented by Crosley and NASCAR Digital Media.